The screams behind the steel door of the corridor was quiet. Too quiet for a place that was supposed to be full of life. Ethan walked slowly, his boots making soft echoes on the cold metal floor. He wasn't supposed to be here. This section of the research station was restricted, marked with red warning signs that read, "Authorized personnel only, biohazard zone." But Ethan wasn't the kind of man who followed rules when something didn't feel right. He had been delivering tools from the engineering deck when he first heard it, a faint sound, almost lost in the hum of machinery. At first, he thought it was just air moving through the vents. Then it came again, sharper this time, a scream. Not loud, not clear, but filled with pain. Ethan stopped in the middle of the corridor, his heart beating faster. He turned his head, listening. There it was, again, a soft, desperate cry, like someone trying not to be heard but unable to hold the pain in. He followed the sound, step by step, until he reached a large steel door at the far end of the hallway. The door was old, scratched, and reinforced with thick bolts. Yellow hazard tape was wrapped around the handle. Another sound came through this time, a whimper. Ethan's eyes fell on something strange at the bottom of the door. Sticking out from the small gap between the floor and the metal was a tiny tuft of white fur, soft, thin, trembling from some faint movement inside. He crouched down, his hand reaching toward it. The fur twitched. He froze. Something was on the other side. "Hello," he whispered, his voice barely above a breath. No answer. Just the sound of quick breathing. Ethan leaned closer, pressing his ear to the cold door. The air on the other side felt different, warmer, mixed with the faint smell of antiseptic and burnt metal. And then he heard it clearly. Chains rattling, followed by a weak, trembling voice. ... Please, stop." Ethan's stomach tightened. That wasn't the voice of a soldier or a criminal. It was soft, high-pitched, like a young girl's voice. Before he could speak again, heavy footsteps echoed from the other side. A deep, cold voice barked orders. "Subject 12, hold still." A loud crack followed, like electricity sparking. The girl screamed again, short and sharp, then fell silent except for shallow breaths. Ethan's fists clenched. He didn't know who Subject 12 was. He didn't know what kind of experiments were happening here. He knew one thing: someone was hurting her. He glanced around the corridor. There were cameras on the ceiling, but one was broken, hanging by loose wires. Lucky for him, he pressed his ear back to the door, trying to catch more. The voices were muffled, but he could make out words. "She's not responding to the pain. Threshold test. Increase voltage by 20%. Ethan's jaw tightened. He imagined the girl strapped to a table, metal wires biting into her skin. He had seen the science division's methods before: cold, merciless, and always hidden away behind locked doors. Then he heard something else, a faint scratching sound, right where the tuft of fur had been. He looked down. A small shadow moved. Under the gap. For a second, he saw it, a trembling paw, delicate and thin, with short claws and fur so white it almost glowed. Not human. The paw jerked back quickly, as if whoever it belonged to was afraid of being caught even touching the door. Ethan's chest felt tight. He whispered again, softer this time. "It's okay. I'm here." For a moment, there was silence. Then, a soft reply. "They'll hurt you too." The words were so quiet he almost didn't hear them. Before Ethan could answer, the footsteps inside grew louder again. A heavy thud echoed, followed by a sharp command: "Sedate her." There was a hiss, probably a gas injector. The girl coughed weakly, and then everything went still. Ethan stood up, his eyes burning with anger. He had seen enough. He didn't know how many guards were inside. He didn't know what exactly they had done to her. But he knew one thing: he couldn't just walk away. His mind raced. He could come back later, maybe tonight. But what if she didn't survive that long? What if Subject 12 never saw another sunrise? His hand brushed against the side pocket of his jumpsuit. Inside was a small crowbar he had taken from the engineering bay earlier. He hadn't known why he kept it with him. Till now, Ethan looked up at the steel door one last time. Behind it, a scared, fragile creature was trapped in a world of pain. And every instinct in him screamed that he had to do something. He stepped back from the door, his breath slow and steady. "Hang on," he whispered to the girl behind the steel. "I'm coming for you." Far away down the corridor, an automated patrol bot turned the corner. Ethan slipped into the shadows, already planning his next move. Tonight, the steel door would not hold. The light inside the laboratory was not like normal light. It was cold, harsh, almost blue, and it made every shadow look sharper, every movement more frightening. Subject 12 lay on a narrow metal table, her arms and legs strapped down with thick black belts. Her long white ears twitched weakly whenever the cold air touched them. Her fur had once been soft, but now patches were missing, burnt away by heat tests or shaved for injections. Tiny red marks dotted her arms where needles had gone in and out. Her breathing was shallow, each inhale sounding like a small whimper. 3 people in white lab coats stood around her. One was tapping a datapad. Another adjusted the wires connected to her chest. The third one, a tall man with a silver badge, was watching her eyes closely, like a hunter observing a trapped animal. "Pain threshold test, stage 7, the tall man ordered. The one with the wires nodded and pressed a button. Electricity hissed. A sharp current shot through the straps holding her wrists. Her body jerked violently. Her eyes squeezed shut. A choked cry escaped her throat, heart rate spiking. The man with the datapad said calmly, as if he were reading numbers from a weather report. The tall man didn't blink. "Increase by 15%. Another shock came, stronger this time. Her claws scratched helplessly against the metal table, leaving small marks. Her ears folded tight against her head, and her legs kicked weakly against the restraints. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please stop." But they didn't. Single quotes. One of the scientists stepped closer and slid a needle into her arm. A thick, glowing liquid entered her veins. Within seconds, the pain seemed to double. Her back arched, and she gasped, eyes wide in silent shock. The tall man watched with interest. "She's resisting longer than expected. Her species' nerve structure is more resilient than we thought." The man with the datapad asked, "Do we test healing again after this?" "Yes," the tall man replied. "I want to see how fast she recovers from cellular damage. Apply the burn test." One of the scientists picked up a metal rod from a heating unit. The tip glowed red. The girl's breathing quickened. She could feel the heat even before it touched. Her skin, her tail curled around her leg in fear. She tried to move, but the straps were too tight. The heated rod came closer. The first touch sent a sharp, sizzling pain through her side. Her scream echoed around the lab, bouncing off the walls like a trapped bird. She twisted in the restraints, desperate to get away, but there was nowhere to go. The man with the rod pulled back, inspected the burn, then looked at the tall man. "It's deep. Shall I proceed with the healing observation?" The tall man nodded. "Record the exact time." A different needle went in. This one filled with a strange green fluid. It spread warmth through her body, but not the kind that comforted. Felt unnatural, like something crawling under her skin. Slowly, before the scientist's eyes, the burn began to fade. Like the fur didn't grow back immediately, but the skin sealed itself. In less than 2 minutes, the wound was gone, as if it had never been there. The tall man smiled for the first time. Remarkable. Her regenerative ability could be weaponized. The girl turned her head away from him, tears slipping down her cheeks. She wasn't a weapon. She wasn't a project. She was alive. She had a name. But she hadn't spoken it. In months, prepare for endurance cycle. The tall man said. The scientists began setting up another device, a large, circular ring above the table that emitted a faint humming sound. The girl knew this machine. It would make her body feel like it was under crushing gravity, testing how much her species could endure before breaking bones. But before they could start, the door alarm beeped faintly, just a short, soft sound. That made the tall man glance up. He walked over to the control panel, checking the security feed. Nothing unusual, except for one thing. One of the hallway cameras was offline. He frowned. Send a patrol to check Section 4, he ordered. The girl's ears twitched at his words. Section 4. That was where she had heard the voice earlier, that warm, human voice. Her heart pounded, not from fear this time, but from a flicker of hope. Maybe he was still there. Maybe he hadn't left her after all. The tall man turned back to her, placing one gloved hand on the table beside her head. Your suffering has meaning, Subject 12, he said coldly. One day you will help us reshape the galaxy. She closed her eyes, wishing she could vanish into the darkness. But in the back of her mind, she held on to that voice. Voice that had whispered through the steel door, I'm here. I'm coming for you. Night fell on the research station like a heavy shadow. Most sections had gone quiet, except for the distant hum of machinery and the occasional buzz of patrol drones. Ethan stood in the darkness of an unused maintenance tunnel, his back against the wall, listening to the rhythm of the guards' footsteps outside. He had been watching their patrol patterns for hours. 2 guards walked past the steel door every 4 minutes. 1 security drone floated overhead every 6 minutes. There was a blind spot just 3 seconds right after the drone turned the corner and before the next guard appeared. 3 seconds. That was all he had to move. He gripped the small crowbar in his hand. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it could break locks and bones if needed. In his other pocket, he had a stolen ID card from a careless maintenance worker, though it wouldn't open the heavy quarantine door. That door needed muscle. Ethan's eyes narrowed as he thought about the girl, the soft voice, the trembling paw under the door. The memory of her cry made his chest burn with anger. He whispered to himself, this ends tonight. He waited, counting in his head. 1 guard passed. The drone's hum grew faint as it moved down the hall. Now, Ethan slipped out of the maintenance tunnel, his boots silent on the cold floor. He reached the steel door in seconds and inserted the ID card into the side panel. The screen flashed red. Access denied. Figures, he muttered. He crouched, sliding the crowbar into the gap near the lock. Metal groaned softly as he pushed, trying to be as quiet as possible. 1 wrong move and the alarms would dash, beep. The panel lit up in bright red. Unauthorized entry DTICT, CITES, froze. Then a sharp mechanical voice spoke from the ceiling. Security breach detected in Section 4. All units respond. Damn it, he hissed. Heavy footsteps echoed from both sides of the hall. No more time for stealth. Ethan stood and kicked the door hard. The reinforced steel didn't break, but the impact shook the bolts loose just enough to widen the gap. He kicked again, harder this time. The door gave a painful metallic scream before flying open, slamming against the wall inside. The scene before him was worse than he imagined. Bright blue lights shone over a cold metal table. The alien girl lay strapped down, her long white ears drooping, her body trembling under tight restraints. Tubes ran from her arms to strange machines filled with glowing liquid. Her fur was patchy, her skin marked with burns and needle scars. Her eyes half open looked glassy, dazed. Like she wasn't sure if she was dreaming. Two guards in black armor spun around, rifles raised. "Stand down." One shouted. Ethan didn't. He charged. The first guard aimed, but Ethan slammed a crowbar into the barrel of his rifle, twisting it away before smashing the guard's helmet. The man crumpled to the floor. The second guard fired. Stun bolt grazed Ethan's shoulder, sending a jolt of pain down his arm, but he kept moving. He swung the crowbar in a wide arc, knocking the rifle out of the guard's hands before ramming his fist into the man's chest plate. The guard gasped for air and staggered back. Ethan grabbed the man by the collar and threw him into the wall. He hit the floor and didn't get up. For a moment, the room was silent except for the beeping of the machines. Ethan turned to the table. Stepping closer, the alien girl stared at him, her eyes wide now, trying to focus. Up close, she looked even younger than he expected, maybe 15, 16 at most. Her small nose twitched like a rabbit's, and her lips trembled as if she wanted to speak, but COULDN. Single quotes T. Ethan quickly pulled at the restraints, but they were magnetic locks too strong for the crowbar. He looked around, spotted a control panel, and yanked out the wires. The locks released with a click. The moment her arms were free, she tried to sit up, but her legs were weak. Ethan gently lifted her off the table, feeling how light she was. "Can you walk?" he asked. She shook her head faintly, her voice barely a whisper. They'll come back." Ethan glanced at the door. She was right, heavy footsteps were already echoing in the hall. He adjusted his grip, pulling her close to his chest. "Then we won't be here when they do." The girl's head rested against his shoulder as he carried her toward the exit. Her ears brushed against his cheek, and for a split second, he felt her heartbeat, fast, terrified, but still fighting. The alarm screamed louder now, and red warning lights flashed across the walls. Over the intercom, a cold voice ordered, "Seal all corridors. Subject 12 must not leave the facility." Ethan tightened his hold on her. "Over my dead body," he muttered, running into the hallway just as the next wave of guards appeared. Ethan ran. The alien girl clutched tightly in his arms, her soft fur brushing against his chin. The corridor ahead flashed red with emergency lights, and the air was thick with the wail of alarms. Behind them, heavy boots pounded on the metal floor, and mechanical voices barked orders through the intercom. Section 4 compromised. Intercept immediately. Ethan's lungs burned, but he didn't slow down. The girl was light too light, like she hadn't eaten properly in weeks, but every step made her tremble against him. "We're going to make it," he told her, though even he didn't know if that was true. They turned a corner, only to find two security drones hovering in the middle of the hallway. Their glowing red sensors locked on him instantly. Unauthorized lifeform detected. Neutralize. Twin barrels slid out from the drone's sides. Ethan ducked into the nearest open doorway, just as the drones fired. Blue stun bolts exploded against the wall, sending sparks across the floor. The room they had entered was some kind of secondary lab glass tanks filled with strange liquid lined the walls, and the air smelled faintly of chemicals. Ethan set the girl down gently behind a metal table. "Stay here," he said. She reached out weakly, grabbing his sleeve. "Cute." He gave her a quick, confident smile, even though his heart was racing. "Not if I kill them." First, the drones floated into the lab, scanning side to side. Ethan stayed low, moving around the table, his eyes on the ceiling. Above one of the tanks, a loose cable dangled from an overhead light. He waited until the first drone passed directly under it, then he grabbed the cable and yanked hard, tearing it free. Sparks flew as the live wire fell onto the drone's casing. There was a burst of electricity, and the machine spasmed before crashing to the floor. The second drone swiveled toward him, but Ethan hurled the crowbar like a spear. it struck the drone's optical sensor, shattering the glass. The drone spun wildly, smashing into one of the tanks. The glass exploded and green liquid flooded the floor, sizzling as it touched the metal. "Let's go," Ethan shouted, grabbing the girl again. They bolted back into the corridor, stepping over the wreckage. Somewhere far ahead, a deep rumble shook the walls in explosion. The station's automated defenses were kicking in as they ran. The girl's voice trembled against his chest. "They'll lock all the doors soon." Ethan glanced at the branching corridors. She was right, emergency shutters were already sliding down in the distance. He made a quick decision and darted into a side hallway, heading for the maintenance sector. If he could reach the old service tunnels, they might get out without crossing the main checkpoints. The maintenance hall was dim, the lights flickering, and the air heavy with dust. They passed crates, broken machinery, and abandoned tools. Somewhere behind them, footsteps grew louder. Eigen guards were tracking them. They came to a junction where a blast door blocked the way forward. Beside it, a keypad blinked red. Ethan set the girl down, pulled a screwdriver from his pocket, and pried open the panel. "Hurry," she whispered. "They're coming." "I know," he muttered, twisting wires. The girl's ears twitched, catching the sound of metal boots approaching. Fast shadows appeared on the wall. The keypad beeped. The blast door slid open just enough for Ethan to grab her and squeeze through before it slammed shut again. They found themselves in a wide corridor, filled with steam pipes and humming power lines. It was hot, almost suffocating, but the heat didn't slow him. What stopped him was the sudden roar of fire. An overhead pipe burst with a deafening hiss, releasing a torrent of burning gas. Flames erupted, blocking their path forward. The girl coughed, covering her face. We can," Ethan said firmly. He spotted a fire suppression control box on the wall. The glass was intact, but one hard punch shattered it. He pulled the lever inside, and with a hiss, foam burst from the ceiling, smothering the flames just enough for them to pass. They slipped through the smoke, Ethan shielding her from the worst of it. His arm ached from carrying her so long, but he didn't slow down. Finally, he reached another door. This one marked Service Access Tunnel 3. Beyond it lay a way out, but as Ethan reached for the handle, a shadow fell over them. From the far end of the corridor, a massive security mech stepped forward, its eyes glowing bright red, heavy weapons unfolding from its arms. "Subject 12 will be returned." Ethan set the girl down gently and stepped in front of her, fists tightening. The mech's footsteps were slow but heavy, each one shaking the floor. The girl's voice trembled. "You can't fight that." Ethan glanced back at her, his face calm, but his eyes fierce. "Watch me." The mech's eyes glowed like two burning coals, its armored feet smashing into the floor with each slow, deliberate step. Every movement carried the weight of a machine designed to crush anything in its path. Its voice was cold, mechanical, without the slightest trace of mercy. "Subject 12 will be returned. Human interference will be eliminated." Ethan didn't move back. His heart pounded, but his feet stayed planted between the alien girl and the towering machine. He glanced quickly around the corridor, searching for anything he could use. The walls were lined with steam pipes, some trembling with pressure. The girl's voice trembled from behind him. You can't fight it. It's built to kill soldiers." Ethan kept his eyes on the mech. "I'm not a soldier," he said. Quietly, "I'm worse. I'm someone with nothing to lose." The mech raised its right arm, the barrel of a heavy rotary gun spinning to life. Ethan moved first, grabbing the girl and diving behind a large steel crate as the mech opened fire. Bullets tore into the metal, sparks flying everywhere. The crate wouldn't hold for long. Ethan peeked out, spotting one of the steam pipes above the mech's head. A plan formed instantly. He pulled a wrench from his belt and handed the girl his crowbar. "Hold this, and if anyone but me comes close, wing." Her wide eyes stared at him, but she nodded, gripping the weapon with both hands. Ethan waited for the mech to fire again. When it did, he rolled out from behind the crate, sprinting toward the wall. Bullets whizzed past, some grazing his arm. But he reached the steam pipe and swung the wrench hard. The first hit dented it. The second broke it open. With a deafening hiss, scalding steam blasted out, hitting the mech's head and shoulders. The machine stumbled, its sensors flickering as the heat clouded its vision. Ethan didn't stop. He ran toward the mech, jumping onto its damaged arm and climbing up toward the control panel on its chest. The mech roared, trying to shake him off. He gritted his teeth, pulled a small maintenance knife from his pocket, and stabbed it into the panel's wiring. Sparks erupted, and the mech jerked violently. One massive arm swung blindly, smashing into the wall and sending pieces of metal flying. From the floor, the girl cried out, "Ethan, behind you." He turned just in time to see the mech's other arm swinging down like a hammer. He leaped off, hitting the ground hard and rolling away as the arm crashed into the floor. Where he'd been standing, the mech's gun spun up again, but before it could fire, Ethan grabbed a loose power cable from the ground, thick, sparking line torn free. During the fight, with a grunt, he hurled it at the mech's chest. Electricity surged through the machine, its limbs convulsing. For a moment, it seemed like it would collapse, but it didn't sink. The mech let out a deafening mechanical roar and charged. Ethan barely had time to react before it slammed into him, knocking the air from his lungs. He hit the wall, pain shooting through his ribs. Through the haze, he saw the mech turning toward the girl. Her small frame shook, but she held the crowbar tightly. When the machine stepped closer, she swung with all her strength, striking the mech's damaged chest plate. The sound echoed down the corridor. It wasn't much, but it made the mech pause. That pause was all Ethan needed. He pushed himself up, grabbed the crowbar from her hands, and drove it deep into the mech's exposed wiring. This time, the machine's lights flickered violently, its arms twitching before going completely limp. The massive frame tilted, then crashed to the floor with a metallic thud that shook the ground. For a long moment, the corridor was silent, except for Ethan's heavy breathing. The girl looked at him with wide, stunned eyes. You actually did it." Ethan gave her a quick, tired grin. "Yeah, but we need to move." That thing probably told every guard where we are. And he was right. Already the distant echo of running boots filled the air. Voices shouted orders. Section 3. Cut them off. Do not let Subject 12 reach the surface. Ethan scooped her up again, his muscles aching but his steps steady. They sprinted down the corridor, weaving through steam and shadows. They passed through a half-lit maintenance room and into a narrow tunnel that sloped upward. Every step felt heavier. Every sound behind them felt closer. The girl whispered in his ear, "Why are you doing this? You don't even know me." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Because when I saw you, I knew you didn't deserve to be in that cage. And because I've been where you are." She didn't ask what he meant. The way his voice cracked said enough. They emerged into a wider passage lined with storage lockers. Ethan kicked one open, pulling out a small EMP grenade. It was old, but it might buy them a few seconds if drones showed up behind them. The sound of boots grew louder. They were being hunted, and the predators were closing in. Ethan looked ahead, spotting a sign, "Service Tunnel Exit 200 meters. Almost there. But between them and that door, a security checkpoint waited, and it was fully manned. The checkpoint loomed ahead like a steel wall of doom. Bright floodlights lit the passage, and rows of heavy barricades blocked the way. 6. Guards in full black armor stood ready, their rifles already raised. Behind them, a blast door waited beyond. That was the service tunnel. And beyond that, freedom. Ethan slowed for just a moment, setting the alien girl on her feet. Her legs wobbled instantly, and she leaned against the wall for balance. He crouched down so they were eye level. "This is it," he said. "We get through them, we're out. But if I go down, you run." Her ears flattened. "I'm not leaving you," she said, her voice trembling but firm. A faint smile touched his lips. "Let's not make it come to that." The guards shouted. "Drop the subject," hands in the air. Ethan straightened, stepping forward slowly. His left hand reached into his pocket, fingers curling around the small EMP grenade. He tossed it casually toward the barricade. The guards barely had time to react before a bright flash filled the corridor, and a pulse of energy rippled through the air. The lights flickered. The guards' visors glitched, and their rifles sputtered uselessly for a moment. That moment was all Ethan needed. He charged. The first guard swung his rifle like a club, but Ethan ducked low, driving his shoulder into the man's chest and sending him sprawling. The second guard tried to draw a sidearm, but Ethan slammed his elbow into the man's helmet, then wrenched the weapon from his grip. The third guard managed to land a hard punch to Ethan's ribs. Pain shot through him, but he didn't slow. Down he spun, using the stolen pistol to fire at the guard's knee joint. The man collapsed, armor clanging against the floor. By now, the others had recovered from the EMP. Gunfire erupted in the tight corridor, bullets sparking off walls and tearing into nearby crates. Ethan ducked behind a barricade, returning fire with quick, controlled bursts. Behind him, the girl crouched low, her ears twitching at every shot. She looked around frantically for anything that could help. Her eyes landed on a maintenance locker. She crawled to it, pulled it open, and found a long metal pipe. It was heavy, but she gripped it tightly, dragging it toward Ethan. When one of the guards rushed their position, she swung the pipe with all her strength, striking his knee. The man shouted in pain, stumbling just long enough for Ethan to finish him with a hard blow to the helmet. "You're full of surprises," Ethan said. Glancing at her, her breathing was fast, but she gave a faint smile. "You didn't think I'd just hide, did you?" More guards were coming from deeper inside the checkpoint, their boots thundering on the metal floor. Ethan knew they couldn't keep fighting like this. He spotted the blast door control panel on the far wall. If they could reach it and override the lock, they might just make it through. "Cover me," Ethan told her, handing her the pistol. Her hands shook as she gripped it. "I've never point and squeeze," he said, before breaking from cover. Bullets whizzed past him as he sprinted toward the panel. One grazed his shoulder, another struck the wall inches from his head. He dove into a slide, coming to rest against the control box. He ripped off the cover, sparks flying as he jammed wires together. The blast door began to rise, slowly, painfully. Slowly behind him, the girl fired wildly, forcing the guards to duck. She wasn't a marksman, but she was brave, and every shot bought Ethan a few more seconds. The blast door was halfway open when one of the guards charged at her, knocking the pistol from her hands. She stumbled back, her ears flattening in fear. Ethan turned, rage flashing in his eyes. He ran full force at the guard, tackling him to the ground. They struggled, fists and elbows flying. The guard slammed Ethan's head against the floor. But Ethan grabbed the man's helmet and smashed it against the edge of a barricade. The guard went limp. The blast door was now 3/4 open. "Go!" Ethan shouted. The girl hesitated for only a second before ducking under the rising door. Ethan followed, but just as he reached the other side, a bullet ripped into his leg. He stumbled, nearly falling, but she grabbed his arm, pulling him through. The blast door slammed shut behind them, sealing the guards on the other side. For a moment, only their heavy breathing filled the tunnel. Ethan leaned against the wall, clutching his leg. Blood soaked his pants, but his eyes stayed locked on the path ahead. "We're not safe yet," he said, "but we're close." The girl moved to support him, her small frame steady despite her own exhaustion. "Then let's finish this," she whispered. They began moving through the dim tunnel, unaware that the enemy still had one last move to stop them. The service tunnel was long, dark, and smelled of rust and damp air. Their footsteps echoed faintly, each one a reminder that they were still alive, but not yet safe. Ethan limped heavily, his arm draped over the alien girl's shoulders for support. Her steps were unsteady too, but together they kept moving. Somewhere far behind them, they could still hear faint thuds, dull and rhythmic. It wasn't footsteps. It was something heavier. "They're not stopping," Ethan said through clenched teeth. "They'll chase us until they can't." The girl looked up at him, her white ears twitching in the low light. "What if they catch us?" Ethan gave her a tired grin. "Then we make sure they wish they hadn't." They rounded a bend. In the tunnel, and at the far end, they saw a faint blue light shimmering against the walls. Fresh air drifted through, carrying with it the smell of rain. "Is that outside?" she asked, her voice almost breaking. Ethan nodded. "That's freedom." They quickened their pace, but the sound behind them grew louder. From the shadows of the tunnel, a shape emerged, a smaller, sleeker mech, built for speed. Its eyes glowed blood red, and its voice was sharp and cold. "Subject 12 detected. Human accomplice, terminate." Ethan shoved the girl ahead. "Run." She hesitated, looking back at him. "What about you? Go," he barked, his voice leaving no room for argument. She ran toward the light, her small frame vanishing into the glow, while Ethan turned to face the machine. He had no crowbar, no rifle, just his fists, and whatever stubbornness still burned in him. The mech charged. Ethan dove to the side, rolling against the tunnel wall. He grabbed a loose piece of rebar from the floor and swung it as the machine passed. The metal rod sparked against its armor, but didn't pierce. The mech turned fast, swiping at him with a razor-sharp limb. It caught his side, slicing through his jacket and grazing his ribs. Pain flared, but Ethan didn't let go of the rebar. Far ahead, the girl stopped. She looked back, ears standing tall, her breathing sharp. She couldn't leave him, not after everything. She spotted a loose cable hanging from the tunnel ceiling, sparking with electricity. With a burst of desperate courage, she leaped and grabbed it, yanking it down. Sparks rained as the cable tore free, its live end whipping wildly. "Ethan," she shouted. He understood instantly. He baited the mech, stepping back toward her. The machine lunged at him, raising its blade arm, and in that moment, he grabbed the sparking cable from her hands and rammed it into the mech's neck joint. Electricity surged through the machine, its red eyes flashing wildly before going dark. It staggered once, then collapsed with a deafening clang. Ethan dropped the cable, chest heaving. She ran to him, catching his arm. "You're hurt," she whispered. He gave her a weak smirk. "Yeah, but you should see the other guy." They moved together, toward the blue light. Each step felt heavier, but the air grew fresher with every breath. Finally, they emerged from the tunnel into the open night. Rain fell softly on their faces, the cool drops washing away the scent of metal and fear. Above them, the sky stretched. Wide and free, stars peeking through breaks in the clouds. The girl stopped, tilting her face upward, letting the rain soak into her fur. For a long moment, she just stood there, breathing deeply, eyes closed. Ethan watched her, leaning on a broken railing for support. "You've never been outside, have you?" he asked quietly. She opened her eyes slowly and shook her head. "Not since they took me." He stepped closer, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "They won't take you again." Her lips trembled, and she blinked away tears. Why? Why would you risk everything for me? Ethan looked out at the dark forest beyond the station. Because someone once saved me when I had nothing left. I promised myself I'd do the same for someone else if I ever got the chance. For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the rain and the faint hum of the wind. Finally, she stepped forward, wrapping her arms around him. It was a soft, almost uncertain hug, but it carried the weight of everything she couldn't say. When she pulled back, she looked up at him. My name? It's Leora. Ethan smiled faintly. Nice to meet you, Leora. I'm Ethan, and from now on, you're not just a subject number. She gave a small nod, her eyes shining even in the dim light. From now on, I'm free. Together, they turned toward the forest, disappearing into the night while the alarms of the station grew distant behind them. For the first time. In what felt like forever, Leora took a deep breath, and it tasted like freedom.